Start. Sir, as the Honorable Minister has just told us, having found that it was not possible to reach the goal set out in Article 45 of the Constitution within the prescribed period, that is, the introduction of universal, free, and compulsory education for children up to the age of 14 years. It is now thought of being achieved by the next decade, and to achieve this goal of introducing universal, free, and compulsory education, the necessary conditions should be created in those places where we think of enforcing this type of education. Stop. The previous speaker was pinpointed certain of the problems. Stop. Of course, this bill refers only to the Union Territory of Delhi, but as the Honorable Minister has just told us, he has introduced this bill as a model legislation to the respective states. So, when we take into account the entire situation in the country today, only 60% of the school going children of the age group 6 to 11 are attending primary schools. Stop. Again, out of 23 million girls of the school age, only 10 million girls are attending the schools. Stop. Even according to the education minister, in order to achieve the object of introducing free and compulsory primary education, we will have to provide in the third 5 year plan for 90 lakhs students more. Stop. This is a great task. Stop. Here also, sir, I don't complain that the government has not given sufficient attention to this problem. Stop. We have considerably increased the number of primary schools, especially the government has increased the number. Stop. But we have a lot of ground to cover yet. Stop. Sir, the previous speaker has told us that unless we create the necessary condition to enable the parents to send their children to schools, it will be very difficult to enforce this legislation. Stop. Perhaps it might mean imposing some hardship also on the parents, but that does not mean that we should not pass this legislation, and perhaps passing this legislation might be an incentive to the government to wake up and realize their responsibility in creating a sufficient number of schools to give proper education to children. Stopera. Now, as it is today, primary education is left. Of course, more and more responsibility is taken by the government, but education is left in the hands of private agencies. Stop. In every state, in many places, and in many of the rural areas as well, private agencies are imparting primary education. Stop. When government thinks of enforcing free and compulsory primary education, it is the responsibility of the government to provide a sufficient number of institutions, and not only provide sufficient number of institutions but also enable the students to go to those primary institutions free of charge. Stop. I entirely agree with the previous speaker that when we enforce legislation to bring about compulsory education, it is the duty of the government also to see that those children who go to the private institutions will not have to pay high fees. Stop. Para. Sir, everywhere in the country private institutions, at least some of the private agencies. I am not claiming all private slamming all private agencies, but some of the private agencies impose an exorbitant rate of fees which even the middle class citizen is not able to meet. Stop. Let me now come to the prevailing situation in Delhi itself. Stop. The honorable minister has told us that he is introducing this legislation in order that it might serve as a model for others. Stop. I do not know much about the situation prevailing in Delhi, but on the basis of certain facts which I could gather from the people here, I would like to ask if this is the condition in Delhi, both in the municipal corporation area as well as in NDMC area. Will you suggest it to serve as a model to the other states? Stop. Is the present condition in Delhi a model to all the other states? Stop. What is the condition here today? Stop. A middle class man in Delhi finds it very difficult to send his children to a particular institution. Stop. Of course, according to the figures that I could gather from certain of these people, nearly 83% of the total number of children of the age group 6 to 11 are getting primary education. Stop. When compared to the figure for the whole state of only 55%, nearly 44% of the educational institutions are under private management and the rest are under the management of the government and the municipal corporation. Stop. But what is the condition of those institutions which are run by the government and the municipal corporation? Stop. I was told that in the primary schools, all the students are asked to squat on a rug and they are not provided with a sufficient number of stools or anything of the sort. Stop. In the private institutions, there are sufficient furniture, and the education imparted in these private institutions is of a little higher standard. Stop. They are better equipped, and the education imparted to the students is on a higher plane than the other institutions, the government run institutions. Stop. If that is so, an ordinary middle class man would like to send his child to an institution where there is better teaching, but when he sends his children to those uh, institutions managed by private agencies, he has to pay exorbitant fees. Stop. For example, he has got a sufficient number of schools in and around his place, very near to his place. Stop. He will have to send his child to a government institution nearly 2 miles away, and as you know, the transport system in Delhi is not sufficient, and the corporation institutions or the government institutions do not take the responsibility of taking the children from their respective areas to their schools, while most of the private managed institutions have got with them certain vehicles to take these children to the schools. Stop. That is an advantage there compared to other schools. Stop.